It's going to be very difficult for Shaun Micallefs to be able to send this up.
Wiki wiki wah, wiki 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 wah wah wah, wiki 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 wah wah wah. Wiki wah. Thank you. OK, now who watched the budget last night? Everybody? OK, that's great. But I wonder, will the hit of red cordial the Treasurer served to low to middle income earners be enough to have us all still excited and not thinking straight when we come to vote on election day? Or will we have crashed from our sugar high and just vote Labor because we're too tired to do anything else? Well, with the recent polls suggesting a drop in key support for the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, the government have this last week been not so much rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic as pulling them up and fastening them onto the iceberg with welding equipment. As a kind of infrastructure project. For example, last week the PM was up in Brisbane dangling a carrot in front of the Queensland donkey voters, announcing a series of infrastructure projects for the southeast of the state, saying the federal, state and local governments will all chip in, but on one condition.
All three levels of government will contribute funding, but the Prime Minister denies.
I did... That is commitment. I just did not know he was that passionate about infrastructure. But I'll say one thing for the PM, whether it's mopping the floors, packing food hampers or arranging flowers, Scott Morrison is the first Prime Minister we've had to be available on Airtasker. And can I say to all these cynics out there who love disputing everything the Prime Minister says...
We can see a bully when we see them.
Try disputing that. And it's not just the inner-city latte-sipping types the government are dangling carrots in front of. Outer-city Billy tea slurping folks vote as well. And the federal government is throwing a whole bunch of carrots at them. In fact, $750 million worth to boost regional internet speeds because, as a person on the telly said...
We are seeing unprecedented demand for broadband connectivity.
Though not much demand, it seems, for necktie connectivity. But to give this some context, not this, no, the other thing we're talking about, the Libs said they would deliver the NBN for $29.5 billion, but it's actually cost about $57 billion. And NBN Co have even had the audacity to boast about this cost blowout on the side of their vans. Look at that! Made for more! It would have been cheaper to roll out French submarines to the node. Still, I'm quibbling. Carrots are carrots, and the cherry on top of the carrot on the pork barrel cake was last night's budget. And I don't want to take anything away from what was a wonderful evening. It made the Oscars look like a bloated, self-important waste of time. Although I did keep waiting for someone to get up and punch someone else in the mouth. But the Speaker, Andrew Wallace, runs a pretty tight ship these days. Anyway, I think Barnaby was in the toilet for most of the evening. My only real quibble is that they'd already made all the interesting announcements beforehand. For example, in the previous week, the Treasurer told us...
Australia's unemployment rate is now at 4%, the equal lowest in 48 years.
Also at its lowest in 48 years is the Treasurer's talking speed. Now down to 6 words per minute. So, Josh, if you're watching, that pace is fine for a Terrence Malick film, but not for a budget speech. Can I suggest that if you do get to do one of these again, that you have a break in the middle to relieve, and please don't take this the wrong way, the stultifying boredom, and, you know, pick up the pace a bit, something along these lines. And then, you know, back to you and your forecast on net debt as a percentage of GDP. Now, if by some miracle or Job-like test of our faith the LNP wins the election, I guess we can expect a pretty swift Norman Bates-like slashing of public spending. Something I'd like to examine further with former advisor to former Finance Minister Matthias Darius Horsham, now mad as hell's very own Financy Boy.
Shaun, you make me look like an economic girly man.
Darius, the logic of welfare cuts, reducing payments to the unemployed, for example, is that it will spur those without jobs to look for work, thus boosting growth. Could this approach be applied by business to cut wages to staff entirely, thereby spurring them to grow their own food and make their own clothing?
Exactly. Also by the RSPCA to stop accepting abandoned animals, thus spurring the creatures to find their own shelter. Look what can-do capitalism has achieved in aged care services alone, which is often how many of its patients end up dying. Shaun, it's a jungle out there, and we should cut it down, not to create some politically correct, woke, level playing field, but to let businesses develop the high-density residential housing we will need to get out of the unrelenting heat of the sun, which global warming will only make harder and more fiery because of fuel loads and arsonists.
Right. And we should also remember that for lower and middle income earners, things like lowering the fuel excise and the tax offset are only temporary measures.
Yes, just to see everybody through the tough times.
And when you say everybody, you mean everybody in government.
And when I say tough times, I mean the election campaign.
Right. Darius Horsham there.
I certainly am.
All right, well, coming up... thank you, Darius. Coming up a little later on, does the existence of a matte canavan imply the existence of a high-gloss canavan? If you think you know the answer, send it to us, care of the ABC, and you could win a Sally Sarah Siri Sari Silo. Ask questions of and store all your female Indian garments in this giant metal tower built in honour of ABC Radio's most alliterative and sibilant World Today presenter. Normally valued at $150,000, also comes with a free can of Sally Sarah Sorry Solo to apologise for a hard-earned thirst at the end of a hard day's work. That's very difficult to say. Well, slowly catchy monkey. Not just good advice on how to catch a monkey, but pretty much the mantra our government lulls itself to sleep with every night and day. Just 9 years after New Zealand wrote down their offer to take 450 of our refugees, popped it in a bottle and tossed it in the ocean, it's somehow washed up on the shores of Lake Burley Griffin, where it was discovered by Home Affairs Minister Karen Andrews while kite surfing. But I don't want you to think that just because our government has accepted New Zealand's offer that we're suddenly going all soft on asylum seekers. Far from it. The hardness of their arses has not waned. The fact of the matter is that we were blackmailed into this humane approach by none other than Senator Jackie Lambie, who cut a secret deal with Scott Morrison to release the refugees. Yet even now the government would not confirm or deny if any deals were done with senators, although I can confirm that they did deny deals were done, with the PM telling reporters there was no secret deal. Corflute Feng Shui advisor to the PM, Dromel Lebert. Labor has pointed out that back in 2018, the PM said New Zealand's offer to resettle refugees would see people smugglers restart their evil trade. Have we now signed some evil trade agreement with these smugglers?
Well, the Prime Minister leads a pro-business government, and post-pandemic, he's about getting as many businesses as possible up and running again. People smuggling might not be exactly what he had in mind, but as they say, a rising tide lifts all boats.
What about the denials, though? At the time, both the PM and even the leader of the Senate, Matthias Cormann, said there was no secret deal.
Well, I can only prevaricate on behalf of Scott. If you want to wind down the clock non-answer on behalf of Matthias Cormann, you'll have to ask Faceache over there.
All right, Darius?
No, I'm really only here to make jokes about Josh's budget.
Yeah, but Jackie Lambie says there was a secret deal. In fact, she says the Prime Minister kept the details of the agreement in a safe in Parliament House.
That doesn't mean they were secret. Anybody with a combination or some basic safe-cracking skills or some gel-ignite could easily have got into the safe and read the details of the arrangement.
Jackie says that it's a secret safe.
What is that? A secret safe?
Yeah.
The one hidden behind the life-size portrait of Robert Menzies in his office that you open by pressing the I stopped these refugee boat trophy on the bookshelf? That's not a secret safe. That's a walk-in wardrobe where he keeps his collection of baseball caps, 2,000 of them, and the color printer for his spreadsheets. It's also where he keeps the coffin Stuart Roberts sleeps in.
Now, Jackie said that she wanted to make sure everybody who wasn't a security risk was off those bloody islands and that she wanted to put a boot up the PM's bloody clacker.
Well, you'd have to ask her about that. The only secret deal Matthias knew anything about was the one where he got recommended for the OECD job if he agreed to roll Malcolm Turnbull.
All right, well, thank you. Hold that thought. I'm sorry, Emily, would you mind just changing into your Jackie Lambie advisor character for a moment?
Well, it's a big wardrobe and makeup change.
Well, we're happy to wait. She won't be very long. So is Matthias enjoying being Secretary-General of the OECD?
I never hear from him.
Here she is now. Here she is now. Prosecco Mule, elocution and appointment consultant at the Jackie Lambie Network. Jackie says that she was threatened with jail if she didn't keep the secret deal secret. Why has she chosen to speak now and to say bloody so much as she does?
Oh, to be honest with you, Jackie just wanted to put a bloody boot up his bloody clacker and get the bloody job done. I mean, she wasn't going to sit there crossing the PM and be bloody intimidated into not bloody saying anything. I mean, maybe now that it's out and he's the one who's told everyone about it, he can bloody well go to bloody jail, you know? Go and put that in your bloody TV show, that'll give him a warning. Or as Jackie herself would say, go and put that on your bloody TV show, that'll give him a warning.
Right. Thank you very much, Chris. Now, could you go and change back into Dramella now?
Oh, bloody hell.
She won't take us long because we're actually using an editing... Oh, here she is. Dramella, can I ask you about the G20 that the PM will be attending in October, assuming he's still the PM, and the question of whether Vladimir Putin should be allowed to attend, assuming he's still around as well. The PM said, and I quote...
The idea of sitting around a table with Vladimir Putin, for me, is a step too far.
Now, surely, going by this photograph, it's quite a few steps too far.
Well, I say let him attend. Put him in a room with the other 19 leaders and let him go the biff. Call it a special pugilistic operation. Half an hour locked in a room with the likes of Jair Bolsonaro, Olaf Scholz and Ursula von der Leyen would be far more effective than those flaccid flogs in NATO.
All right, and finally, the 70,000 tonnes of coal we're sending to Ukraine.
Oh, let me guess. You and your tree-kissing pervert mates here at the Politburo think Ukraine should have gone all renewable, that we should have sent them some wind turbines or cut out the middleman a boatload of sunshine.
No. But Ukraine has 730,000 tonnes of coal left, which is only enough for 15 to 20 days of power. We're only sending them a tenth of that amount.
Well, you think we should have sent them more?
Well, it's just that when the PM said our coal would power the resistance, he didn't make it clear he only meant for an afternoon.
We could open up a few more mines if you like. It'd be nice to have somewhere warm to send you and Humphreys and Pickering, other than hell, to work for the dole instead of here at Ultimo cranking out your peanut-based meatless sausages.
At least then the government could actually claim to be helping Ukraine.
Look, Keith Pitt rang and asked Whitehaven Coal, a Liberal Party donor, for $31 million of taxpayers' money out of the goodness of his heart. I don't see you getting off your fat ass and doing anything like that. No, that's because we're the superior economic managers. There aren't too many people who could turn $140,000 in donations into $31 million in sales.
Well, why not approach other mining companies? Maybe you could have got the coal at a cheaper price.
Well, as Keith said, Shaun, Whitehaven was the first company to give a positive response to the request.
What, so once you got one quote, you stop?
Exactly. It's the same media advice we give to Keith, just to make sure he doesn't say too much.
You can see how it might look like a political donor buying a favour.
Nonsense. It looks like a political party returning a favour. Anyway, Keith Pitt is like Caesar's wife.
What, dead since 69 BC?
Beyond reproach.
Oh,
I mean, let's face it, when you're so deep in the pockets of the coal industry that you're basically their left nut, there's nothing more for them to offer you.
And you're worried that saying this out aloud might mean resource companies stop donating to you?
Of course we're worried. We're in a perpetual state of anxiety about it. If they ever work out they don't actually need to buy us off, the jig is up, which is why we have to give these companies a $31 million contract, sight unseen, in the hopes that they funnel a few more thousand back sometime before the next election.
Well, thank you very much, Dramella, and please accept on behalf this picture of Vladimir Putin at a table.
Oh, yes, I'll have it.
Now, it's nice, isn't it? All right, well, speaking of war, a key supporter of Anthony Albanese has been in the headlines this week, setting out a security agreement with the Solomon Islands that will give Beijing a base for its navy less than 2,000 kilometres off Australia's coast. Well, I guess China's new ambassador to Australia did say...
China is willing to work with Australia to meet each other halfway.
And the Solomon Islands is even closer than that, so that's a good sign, isn't it? And it's good news for the Solomon Islands too, as apparently the agreement will enable them to request China to send military personnel and armed forces to their country. And we could also soon see a similar arrangement between China and Taiwan, without even the need for Taiwan to request China sending in armed forces. But is a base for the Chinese military only 5 minutes from Cairns if you're travelling by hypersonic missile anything anything to worry about. And what can Australia do to protect itself if there is a Viceroy Cabin Boy, Sir Bobo Gargle?
Well, if you can't beat them, join them, I say.
What else can Australia do to defend itself, apart from switching sides or nothing?
Well, Shaun, if we don't want to become a part of the fastest-growing nation in the world, then we must fight. Fight like we did on the beaches of Gallipoli.
Oh, ineffectively?
Fight like we did at Pearl Harbor and the Battle of Stalingrad.
Yeah, we weren't there.
Exactly, Shaun. We've got to face up to the fact that we're done for. As a military force, we're very good at helping with the hard rubbish up in flood-affected areas when we get around to it, and catching COVID on our way to drop-off aid to Tonga, and force-feeding those few who still remain alive in our aged care Soylent Green facilities. But what else are our fighting men, and to a lesser extent women, good for, apart from the occasional hazing ritual or putting him in a queue to give evidence of the Ben Robert Smith trial?
The document about the Solomon Islands-China agreement was leaked on social media.
Yes, but we already knew about that.
Oh, how so?
Oh, we have our ways, Shaun. There it is. These little transmission devices we used to spy on Timor-Leste and our other close Pacific family members.
All right. What do you make of the fact that China has been sending the Solomon Islands fake guns?
Well, I just hope they weren't the ones we ordered, or I shall be sending a very strongly worded letter to the manager of the Kwang Lee Smoo Novelty Company. Just to say hi. Damn it.
Well, Bobo, thank you very much for coming along tonight and answering our questions to the best of your ability. Please accept on our behalf a piping hot Andrew Hasty Tasty pastry. The ideal meal during the breaks in giving evidence in the Ben Robert Smith defamation trial.
Yummy!
The journey on life's road is often bumpy. And then, when it's finally time to sit back and take a breath, we can discover we're not as well prepared as we thought. But now there's a bank that understands that when you retire, unwanted surprises can leave a large hole in your nest egg. A bank that will come to the rescue, no questions asked. The Bank of Mum and Dad. Talk to Mum and Dad today. We'll back you. What choice do we have?
Next up, which Outback family has the most snakes? With regional content, followed by a battle for whatever limited tertiary education funding there is available in University Challenge. And later, Dame Elizabeth takes us on a tour of Cruden Farm's shipbreaking yards.
Felt Hoop, your thoughts on that sketch?
Laughter is a luxury for those with white privilege.
White male privilege.
Yes, I was about to say that, white male privilege.
Old white male privilege.
So the ironic elevation of inconsequential things into problems of comic concern is an old white male thing.
Yes, exactly. Whereas the comedy trope of treating major life problems with flippancy is more the cultural playground of people of colour.
Speaking on behalf of all the races that are unrepresented on this panel, can I just say I think they would be annoyed at me nodding along earnestly at everything they were saying if they were here and allowed to speak for themselves.
No, I'm afraid we don't have time. And speaking of old white male things, back to you, Shaun.
Thank you very much indeed, Alan. Now, while the Prime Minister was up in Queensland last week, shoring up his popularity with the notoriously fickle animal kingdom, and making us all go, oh, by hugging a koala because all the babies had refused, Defence Minister Peter Dutton was scaring the living bejesus out of us with talk of China mounting an unprecedented digital onslaught and that we are in the crosshairs. And obviously a couple of crosshairs would really spoil the look, I think. But mere earthly matters cannot satisfy Mr Dutton's lust for power. Hence his launch last week of an Australian Space Command because of our need for a Space Force in the future. And the thing is, sorry, could we change the picture of Peter Dutton to the moon, please? Oh, you have? Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Given the massive financial commitment that this will involve, the remarkable thing here is that space isn't a marginal seat. Although even if it was, in space no one can hear you scream pork barrelling. Mr Dutton explained that
Australia's Defence Space Command will initially be modest,
before gradually becoming more boastful and cocky. And just as we've done with the tanks, fighter jets and submarines, Australia will invest in new military space capabilities, so you can expect to see these state-of-the-art babies delivered by 3025. Brian Pegmatite, you have Peter Dutton's ear. in a piece of tissue paper under your pillow, as I understand it. Have you told him that China might have the edge on us in terms of conquering the moon, given that they plan sending a crewed mission and building a lunar base on it by 2024?
Space Command is all about doing what Australia does best, Shaun. Taking a dead and desolate expanse of dry, treeless dirt and digging stuff up out of it to sell to China.
But China will have already been there for 50 years before AUKUS started even building our rocket ships.
Shaun, it's all a question of deluding ourselves. And if the 220-year history of this country has taught us anything, is it that we can go somewhere, pretend that no one else is inhabiting the place and then colonise it.
The PM is across this, though, and he said,
"We are a launch nation. We are a space nation. We are an astronaut nation."
In what way are we any of those things?
Shaun, we're a launch nation in that we launched our new space program. We're a space nation in that the announcement occupied some space in various newspapers and television broadcasts. And we're an astronaut nation because of Andy Thomas that time.
One guy hardly makes us an astronaut nation. What about the other 26 million people here? You don't get to float around trying to squirt peanut butter out of a tube.
We can dream, Shaun. And Peter wants to be a part of those dreams.
Like Freddy Krueger.
Peter's announcement of Space Command makes Scott Morrison's Launch Space Astronaut Nation announcement sound like a malfunctioning speak-and-spell toy operated by a lobotomised gorilla. Check out Peter's call to arms and tell me he won't one day make the greatest bald Prime Minister this country has seen since Billy McMahon.
So, friends, to that end, it's my great pleasure today to officially announce the stand-up of Australia's Defence Space Command.
OK, two things. When Peter Dutton says friends, is he referring to his imaginary ones or ones he hopes he'll meet in space one day, presumably in the egg chamber on board the Nostromo? And secondly, when he announces the stand-up of Australia's Defence Space Command, will it be appearing in the Melbourne International Comedy Festival?
Peter's days in government may be numbered, Shaun, and Josh Frydenberg may well get to wear the prime ministerial baseball cap in the post-election leadership spill that follows, but you and your kind here at Woke Central will be laughing out the other side of your preferred pronouns when Peter is king of the moon. Xi Jinping will fall to his knees before him. Putin will worship him as a god, and I shall dance before him as a willing slave, manacled by the neck to the wall.
Well, good luck with it all, Brian. Brian Pegmatone, everybody. Peter Dutton's star child. Thank you, Brian. Well, still to come, we check in and see how things are going with efforts to bring the Tasmanian tiger back to life.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my welcome girl. Send me a kiss by wire. Baby, my heart's on fire.
Plus, the PM proves that he doesn't have a woman problem.
Well, you're a good-looking girl.
To aged care now. And thank you very much. And in news just to hand, police in Adelaide make a $1.6 million cocaine bust. Seems a bit of a waste. Surely marble or bronze would have been cheaper. But right now, a very special report from our new media partner, alt-right Canadian news vlog, Rebel News reporter, Hervé Jiminy. Hervé, who have you been annoying today by claiming to be a journalist when in fact you're just someone with a microphone, a camera and no self-awareness?
Shaun, today I've been annoying a woman trying to eat a sandwich outside of a shop, some policemen trying to move on a crowd at a rally, and a bunch of guys shouting at me out of a passing car after I threw an egg at them.
Well, sounds like it will provide us with the balanced critics of the ABC been baying for. Let's have a look at the tape.
Oh, mate, did you want me to record it?
Yes.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, what would have been the point otherwise?
No, we're at cross purposes. My bodyguards told me the kind of thing you're after, right? But they didn't make clear that you wanted it on tape. Dimmy, you fucking idiot, mate.
What would have been the point? Why would you think I wanted you to go around making a nuisance of yourself for no reason?
Well, I thought it was a power thing and you kind of got off on it or some shit.
Hervé Jiminy there from Rebel News.
Never mind about traffic control, Dimmy. You fucking made me look like a stooge, mate.
Our regular correspondent on alt-right issues this series, unless we get a complaint about Tosh's frankly racist portrayal of him. Then, of course, we'll just drop the character completely. Thank you, Hervé.
Remember Queen Elizabeth's first visit to Australia? Or the disappearance of Prime Minister Holt? Don't worry if you can't, because ABC TV has a bottomless pit of archival footage documentaries utilising every frame of vision ever recorded by an ABC camera. Marvel at how the world has changed. Delight in the tiny budgets required to make these documentaries, and reconsider whether your decision to re-elect the government responsible for the budget cuts behind these programs was such a good idea. Featuring leader tape, damaged film stock, and old test patterns, this series explores the growth of a nation so economically that an algorithm could have made it. This Sunday, a look back at Australians laughing for no reason on ABC and iView.
Welcome back. Well, who are we and why are we like we are? It's hard to believe that it was only halfway through the last century that Prime Minister Robert Menzies surrendered the sovereignty of this country to intergalactic visitors, just one of hundreds of world leaders to submit to the alien domination of our planet. Whether these creatures were invaders or whether no one was technically inhabiting the Earth in the first place, we'll leave to the culture wars. What's important is that we are no longer free to determine our future. Pam Crouton has more.
The aliens poisoned our minds, and we went from being a benevolent and loving people, given only to occasional bouts of racism, to the inhuman monsters bent on self-destruction in the name of consumption that we are today.
Some say that our insatiable craving for material possessions, regardless of the cost, is a good thing, that we are better off for having been colonised. Others pine for the days where things and we ourselves were simple, quite happy in our ignorance and content with a life of boring sustainability.
Now that we want to throw off the shackles of our alien oppressors, though, how do we go about it?
One of the advantages of living in a progressive society is that you can see how much you've lost because of it. If these bastards hadn't have come here, not only would we not have had to give up so much, but we wouldn't even be aware of it.
The knock-on effect of the conquest of Earth is that the descendants of our interstellar conquerors, like Luke and Betty here, feel guilty about it.
We've been living among humans. Is it offensive to call them that?
Probably. You can't say anything these days.
Anyway, we've been here for generations, and while I agree we should dismantle the system that enables the enslavery of mankind and re-engineer everyone's brains back to when they were less selfish and return immediately to our home planet, I wonder how practical, not to mention irresponsible, that would be. Number 23? Thanks, love. I mean, these Earthlings... Oh, can we call them that?
Don't think so. Everything we say is wrong, apparently.
What? How do they expect to survive without us on their now almost completely plundered, chicken salt, half-dead planet without us to help them?
There are those, though, who aren't so irritatingly woke.
Their lives are much better for us being here. They're richer. Most of them no longer have imaginary belief systems. Sexuality is non-binary. Most things are known or knowable, and their natural empathy for each other has been rationalised away with logic and reason, constantly telling them that private vices lead to public benefit. If they'd moved on from their primitive, do-gooder, bleeding heart, kumbaya, Anzac bullshit, they never would have accomplished anything.
But what does humankind itself think, assuming it does?
Oh. Creatures from outer space, the Labor Party, some sort of sentient tree. It doesn't matter who's in charge. They're all the bloody same. I say tear down the 5G towers, don't get vaccinated and stop selling China our baby formula.
Well, not coming up because Tomorrow Tonight is on in a minute.
Remember Antarctic ice? You'll never guess what it looks like now. And I've never felt better in my life. MRI clears Carlton midfielder Patrick Cripps to play on Saturday.
And finally, part of Anthony Albanese's pitch to voters is this.
This government makes announcements and then nothing happens.
And in the context of the election, that could be the government's best hope. Goodbye.
Jive, baby. Oh, baby, telephone.